Vanderbilt football is off to a hot start, but how do they approach their mindset moving forward?
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Begin your coaching legacy today. On this episode, we're going to take a look at how the new coaching rules, we're going to take a look at how they're impacting the program, and special teams seems to be benefiting from those greatly. With the offense's run-heavy, ball control, physical identity, keeping Diego Pavia healthy is priority number one. But developing depth is priority number 1B. However, the mindset is important, and Vandy's off to a hot start. How are they going to approach that mindset going forward? So this was asked of him. This was an interesting quote from the press conference. I was watching the press conference earlier, and I felt like this was an interesting quote. They asked him about, like, hey, you guys are off to a hot start, 2-0, and an impressive 2-0 at that, with a 55-0 thrashing of Alcorn State and a win over an upset win over Virginia Tech, who I believe was either ranked or on the fringe of being ranked. So, by the way, also feeding into this hot start, Vandy has received 18 top 25 votes. So they're just outside the polls there. If they win this week, I believe they will jump into the rankings at like 23, 24, 25, somewhere in that ballpark. That's my anticipation. That's based on absolutely nothing or no inside information. That's just my gut feeling. So here's the quote on mindset that I like. Now, before I pull this quote up, okay, you have to, again, I'm going to review the factors, okay? Big win over Virginia Tech at home in front of a Virginia Tech home crowd, which has been a typical Vandy staple. 55-0 thrashing of Alcorn State. Doesn't usually happen that way, right? You're getting love in the national media. You're getting votes for the top 25 rankings. You're in the conversation. Like all these people are coming out with SEC power rankings, and you're finishing not last, except for On 3. I don't know what On 3 is doing. Kentucky looked absolutely dreadful, and they're somehow at number 11 in the conference. Get out of here with that. But that's a different topic for a different day. All right, Clark Lee. He said this in his press conference, among other things. He said, Don Meyer, who is a legendary basketball coach at Lipscomb, Don Meyer used to talk about planning and preparing as if they lost their past game. He goes on to say, we want a special season, and that means we have to continue to improve. Okay. And this, to me, this quote kind of says how mature they are in this most recent success, because after last year's dreadful season, okay, after last year's dreadful season, 2-10, they've already matched their win total. They were 2-10, and not just any 2-10. They were awful. Like their two wins were barely squeaking by against a horrific Hawaii team, and having a okay lackluster win against Alabama A&M, and then getting shellacked the rest of the way, including a shellacking against UNLV. So you take that into account, and you would think, at this point where Vanderbilt sits right now, these guys would be acting like they won the Super Bowl, right? Well, here's where I think Clark Lee has matured. Here's where I think the Jerry Kill effect is also coming into fruition. What I talked about in January when they hired Jerry Kill. All of this is feeding into where we sit right now. I don't know that Clark Lee makes this statement this time last year, if this were the case. This is part of the maturity, or this is part of the maturing of Clark Lee, which is filtering down through his program. Okay. Don Meyer used to talk about planning and preparing as if they lost their past game. What that quote means is, when you lose your last game, when you lose your previous game, your most recent game, right? Let's say they lost on Saturday, right? They like the mindset typically shifts. And the good teams, their mindset never shifts. They always prepare the same way. They play to a standard. But that's not where Vanderbilt is right now. So Vanderbilt, when they play to a standard, they're getting there, right? They're setting that example. But he's talking about preparing with the urgency of, hey, we've got to get this next one. Like this next one is super important. If we don't get it, it's going to be, there's going to be, it's going to rain down on us, right? So that's what he's talking about there, the urgency in which they need to prepare. So you're watching extra film, you're scripting things, you're putting the team in adverse situations to see how they respond. You're giving them looks. You're having a spirited week of practice. Like you've got guys on the hook where they feel like they need to. You've got a mindset there. You've got a sense of urgency within your program of, hey, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We need to improve. We need to improve. We need to improve. We got to get better. We got to get better, right? This is not acceptable. We got to keep moving forward. We can't look back, right? That's that sense of urgency that you need to continue to improve, because these 2 wins have been far from perfect. Last game, there was not much of a passing game. And I think he goes on in his press conference to talk about how they wish they could have got Nate Johnson some more work, which I'll talk about later. But they scored a special teams touchdown and a pick 6, all like right there, bang, bang. So they lost a couple of possessions in this game because of those quick non-offensive touchdowns. But it's the sense of like understanding that, hey, we've done a really good job and we should celebrate that. We should feel good. But we should also prepare as if there's a massive sense of urgency. Like if we don't win, we're on the hot seat, right? This thing is going to get bad quick. And you've got to have that because the gauntlet of the SEC is bad. Now, part of what's contributing to this mindset, that he's saying there's a positive energy around the building, around the facility. And after a 2-0 start, the way things have gone, that's pretty easy to say. Like that shouldn't surprise anybody, right? But again, that positive mindset is going to come in handy, because when you get to this Missouri game, that's going to be a tough one. A road game against probably a top 10, probably a playoff team, if I had to guess. That's going to be a tough one. Luther Burden he's not pleasant to guard. He's trouble. And that's, Brady Cook is a tremendous quarterback. Eli Drinkowitz has kind of found the formula there. I think Clark Lee should really reach out to Drink and say, okay, look, and he may have in the offseason, because Drink went from 2 seasons ago, they were saying he wasn't going to make it to midseason. They said he was going to get fired after the Georgia game because they didn't want an interim coach to have to deal with Georgia, who was at the time had the best defense in the history of college football. Well, they take Georgia down to the wire. That's that was a turning point for Eli Drinkowitz, right? So what I'm thinking, and his mindset never really changed, but it's almost like some things clicked, and he kind of learned and kind of matured and kind of took his, took on his role and improved his team. They beat Ohio State in the New Year's Six Bowl. They shellacked Ohio State in the New Year's Six Bowl last season. So that was a turning point for Drink. Okay, that same turning point, maybe we'll see if that turning point for Clark Lee was a couple of weeks ago against Virginia Tech. It sure seems that way, but it's all about the mindset. And I think he's hired the right people around him. I think, as Kurt Page has said multiple times on this show, they've eliminated a lot of the emotional interference. And part of that emotional interference is looking up and saying, oh dear God, there's a lot of opposing fans here. This is a road game at home for us. Like, that's emotional interference. That blocks them from having that positive mindset and that attitude, where that mentality and that attitude of, hey, we got this. We're gonna go get this. Look at how they played against Alcorn State, albeit it was Alcorn State, but Vandy never really plays like that against those teams. They always let those teams toy around with them, and they always kind of struggle. And you're like, it's 38-6, and you're like, it's a big margin, but you're left going, what? something not right here, right? You didn't feel that way at all leaving Saturday. And a lot of that was some of that. Well, I don't say a lot of it, but some of it was the juice that they got from the crowd. The crowd showed up and you saw what it did. So I'm interested to see, like, if the crowd shows up for Bama and see what that does. I'd be interested to kind of see how they play. Bama is a really strong team. So I'm not going out on a limb and saying, hey, we most definitely beat Bama if we have a pro Vandy crowd, but I do think it makes somewhat of a difference. But the fact of the matter is this: the energy is great, and I think Jerry Kill, Clark Lee have kind of bonded together to kind of create those vibes, to kind of create that energy, and that's gone a long way into hopefully creating that sense of urgency and the understanding that you have to continue to improve. You have to celebrate what you've done well, which they're doing. They feel good about that. And they're adding onto that foundation of the things they're doing well with things they need to improve. So it's not a negative thing to say they need to improve. They need to continue to improve. They need to continue to fortify what they do well, continue to improve what they don't do so well, and try to build this thing into a total team identity. And so that's what's happening. That's what a mindset does. And urgency, constant urgency, no matter what's happening, and a will to always continue to improve will go a long way into determining the success of your season, especially with a really tough schedule coming down the pike. So, but part of that winning mindset is keeping your number one quarterback healthy and also developing depth behind him, because your identity suggests that you probably should have somebody ready to go. What does that mean exactly? Well, I'll tell you next. All right. Ultimate football head coach. You've heard that, right? Well, Locked On Vandy fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. I've always wanted to be a head coach, but in this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of Vandy? Well, you get to recruit players, you get to hire coaching staff, oversee training camp, and handle scholarships. You control every crucial detail of your program. I don't know that you can get that in other places. Maybe. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love. You're responsible for calling the offensive plays during the game. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want when you want to. Just imagine being in the DMV. You're getting your license renewed, or you're doing something at the DMV that everybody hates going to the DMV. It is a nightmare. Well, if you have Ultimate College Football Head Coach, you might could do a whole 3-year stint as the head coach at Vandy, just sitting in the DMV. It's that much fun, and it's offline, and you can do it right there on your phone. And, of course, we have a special offer for all of you Locked On Vandy fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB. It's right down here, in all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk, as it will get you and your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com. Or just look it up in the app stores. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your legacy today. All right, welcome back. Locked On Vandy Podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network, man. SEC football is about to ignite with the conference schedule. We got just about one more week here before everything really kind of gets off and rolling. But make sure you check out Locked On SEC. There's some great things going on there with Chris Gordy and everything. So make sure you check that out. Get all your information on the SEC and what's going to take place. So thank you, everydayers, by the way. I don't know if I thank you guys enough. My show is starting to take off now, and I credit you out there for passing the word. So I'm going to continue to do my thing. I'm glad that you're on board. Stay with me, ride with me, okay, in my inaugural football season as the host of Locked On Vandy. So this is a lot of fun. So anyway, this will be my second basketball season, though, because I started right at the beginning of basketball, or right in the middle of basketball season, right after football season, actually. They thought there was going to be a coaching change maybe, so they're like, hey, we need to get Locked On Vandy going quickly, and then Clark Lee ended up being retained. But that's neither here nor there. I think that's a little bit of insider information, but I'm glad I'm here nonetheless, and I'm glad Clark Lee is leading this resurgence. But one of the reasons why this resurgence is happening, we've talked about him. I've talked about this a lot, but Diego Pavia is one of the main reasons. His leadership abilities, his gameplay, his talent, his ability to play the quarterback position at a high level, despite not having all the measurables, is nothing short of amazing. But when your offense has a physical running identity, which I love this a lot, and it involves the quarterback. And Diego Pavia is a phenomenal runner. He is a legit factor in the run game. But the only thing is, and this is priority number one, and Clark Lee made mention of this in his press conference, but priority number one is keeping Diego Pavia healthy as you can. And there's different ways to do that. And understandably so, you still have to play to your identity because it's your identity. And if you get away from it, it means you're not confident in it. And teams know that, especially these defensive coordinators around the SEC. They can smell fear, right? South Carolina's defense, they smelt fear last week against Kentucky. Look what happened. Brock Vandergrift is as talented as they come at quarterback, but it was like sharks in the water, man. It was like blood in the water. They smelt that fear. You know how dogs can smell fear? Well, they definitely, Brock Vandegrift definitely reeked of that on Saturday, and he fell apart. South Carolina took advantage of it. So you have to, and I think a lot of it was because Kentucky had a couple bad breaks, and I think they got away from what they do best. Because Brock Vandegrift is way better than what he showed on Saturday. But again, that's SEC football. So you have to stay within your identity. You have to, as soon as you abandon it, that's what teams' goals are. They're gonna do everything they can to take away from what you do. So everything you do in response to that is to try to get back into your identity. So why keep Diego Pavia healthy, or how to keep Diego Pavia healthy? Well, you have to hit those wrinkles. You have to have plays where you get the ball out of his hands quickly. You have to have things to where it's just straight handoffs. Like, you're going to have some of those plays to preserve him a little bit. You're going to have to figure out ways to be able to run a straight up run. Limit his throws, so like maybe some quick screens out to kind of save his arm a little bit. And then also, I think to preserve a lot of that, you have to take advantage of your shot plays too. And so just the things that come off of the run game become more vital as you go, because A, you got to keep Pavia healthy. B, you want to maintain your identity, which these things allow you to do so because you're stretching the field horizontally and vertically. And then C, it's just good football. Like, you're going to have counters off of what you do. So, but that's priority number one. As long as Diego Pavia is in there, he's legit. We've talked about how legit he is. We've talked about his abilities. We've talked about his leadership qualities. Okay. But priority 1B is you got to develop that depth behind him, because your identity, like I said, is the run game, which includes, for Vandy, the quarterback +1 run game. Okay, you have a runner like Diego Pavia, and you don't take advantage of his running ability, then you're playing with one arm tied behind your back. So you have to develop that depth. Now, you've recruited really well at that position. You have two really good freshmen that could step in and play that role and be factors in the run game. You've got Nate Johnson, who is probably the fastest guy on the team. He is lightning in a bottle. And I'm hoping to get him some more reps, but there's got to be a way for him to contribute at some point. So that's a factor, right? That is a weapon that you need to utilize. You have Drew Dickey, who was dead in the water as far as the quarterback race goes. Like, I thought he was about to transfer. Like, I was thinking, okay, maybe it's time for Drew Dickey to move on and find, go to like not Kennesaw State, because he would not fit in at Kennesaw State, but go somewhere like Georgia Southern, Georgia State, Coastal, those places to where like he gets a chance to play, right? Because he didn't beat out Pavia, didn't look like he was going to even beat out Blaze Berlowitz and Nate Johnson, like he was going to be at the beginning of camp, low man on totem pole. But fast forward now into camp, he really made a resurgence. Now he is, and this is kind of what I said that Blaze Berlowitz was going to be, he was going to be the number 2 quarterback, like long term if Pavia goes down. Like, you're probably right now going to see Drew Dickey come in and then maintain a sub package, probably a more inclusive or a bigger sub package with Nate Johnson. So you have to develop that depth. You have to find options, because there's at some point when you play Missouri, then you play Bama, then you play Kentucky. Like, you have a 3-game stretch there. 2 of those games are on the road. Pavia might get banged up a little bit. Like, you're going to have something that can come in there. So that's priority 1B here. And I think he knows that. Clark Lee knows that. But you want to stay within your identity because he knows how important that is to establish, and he knows how important that is to get it going. And then, of course, at some point we're going to see the birth of Smash and Dash. Right, Smash is Pavia, Dash is Nate Johnson, and I'm unveiling that for one person in particular, Kurt Page. He's going to love that one. But Smash and Dash, man, that's going to be a new combo as the season rolls on, because you're going to need it to preserve your identity and to preserve that position. So, but what I'm really loving is the new coaching rules, because it allows everybody to get in there and coach. So how's that affecting things? Who's that benefiting the most? Well, I think special teams could be benefiting the most out of that. I'll tell you why next. All right. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sports book. There's a lot of great bets out there this weekend, so check them out. All right, welcome back. We are wrapping up the show here on the Locked On Vandy podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network. We're getting closer to Vandy's first road trip of the season, so this is exciting. We'll talk about, as we go later in the week, we'll talk about what to expect out of a road trip. Vandy is currently 9.5-point favorites on the road at Georgia State. I feel like that one's kind of a weird odds, but Georgia State's a pretty good team. But we're talking. I've got Dave Cohen, who is the play-by-play broadcaster for Georgia State football. So we got him coming on the show here. I guess for Thursday's episode. So that'll be a lot of fun. But man, a lot of things we talked about over the offseason. Now this was a pretty wild offseason. There was a lot happening with the transfer portal, some of the new rules that came down, which I'm a big fan of a lot of these rules. This rule I'm probably the biggest fan of. I love the helmet communication. I think that makes things a lot easier as far as getting signs and getting plays in, and overall quality of play I think is improved because of it, because the information that you can gather, the tablets on the sidelines have been amazing. So there's been a lot of great things happening with the new rule updates, but the new coaching rules, you can have unlimited coaches now coaching on game days. I think that's incredible. And there's not really any coaching rules now with practice either. So you have a lot of guys at your disposal. So it's kind of truly going to an NFL model, and I'm here for it, man. And one of the units that benefits the most from this unlimited coaching stuff, especially now at the college level, they're starting to really reap the benefits, is special teams. Because like your special teams coordinator is usually an offensive coach. For Vanderbilt, it's tight ends coach John Lepak. And it is, he's got offensive responsibility as well with the tight end position that he's got to manage. So he can't always coach up a guy on special teams, especially if it's a punt return or some sort of special team that gives offense the possession. There's not really much he can do because he's probably dealing with sub packages, getting plays relayed or whatever responsibility he has. He's probably dealing with that. So he has a staff. He has a special teams assistant named Shane Gallant that handles a lot of the, in-game, hey, he has his iPad and he pulls the guy like, hey, go pull the right tackle on punt coverage and, tell him whatever. And he'll pull him and he'll tell him that whatever. So special teams has been tremendous now. And then I think you'll see an increase in quality for special teams across the country, because I think you're going to have these programs that have these special teams aces that can go in and coach a lot of things up. Like Coach Lepak is in charge of like schemes and scouting and stuff. But I mean, I think the official title is special teams analyst, but that's the guy that's probably doing all of the scheme work, all of the scouting work. Coach Lepak is probably in charge of, the strategy of it and what he wants to do philosophy wise, but it's Coach Gallant in this case, but the special teams analyst that really does a lot of the implementation and the coaching up of these special teams during periods at practice and during the games, to where Coach Lepak can't get to it because of his obligations as tight ends coach. Now in the NFL, you have a special teams coordinator, and then he has a staff of usually 2 guys that help him. So that's a little bit, that's where the NFL and college differs. But it's still, having that available is tremendous, and you get, elite special teams play and you get to focus on that stuff. Jesse Mirko boomed a 69-yard punt. He's been a tremendous punter. The kicking is just a fleeting thing anyway. I don't think there's any amount of coaching staffs and iPads and things that can alleviate some of the problems with kicking, because weather conditions and psychology play a big factor in that. But one of the things that I really think has benefited the most is the return game. Right? You've had a couple of kickoff returns that I think if you break 1 or 2 tackles, house. Martell Height took a punt return to the house. I think the special teams return units have been providing, especially those units, have been providing a boost in field position. I think they've been giving the offense a first down or 2 on their returns at least, if not a full 6 points. But this is this is something that, like, in the past, without iPads, with limited number of coaches, sometimes these coverages and things would kind of fall by the wayside, and you would see them repeating problems throughout the course of the season. It's not the case anymore, because now you have somebody right there to correct it. You got the guy on the iPad. He's got the iPad like this. He's like, all right, let's see. All right, see right here, like, see where you covered that. If you go here instead of here, then you can make the tackle there. Or, hey, you get this guy sealed off and this guy sealed off, you cut it right through there. Like, he could go to Martell Height and go, hey, look at this return. Look, if you stick your feet in the ground here and go that way, you're gone, right? You can do things like that now on the sidelines, whereas you couldn't before. Like, you'd have to kind of remember it, draw it up, and then hope that there's not some big responsibility you had on offense or defense as a special teams person. And then also you get a chance to have a guy that's just truly and solely dedicated to special teams. And then everybody else can kind of chip in. Where the other people chip in is at practice, where they're setting up drills. They've got different responsibilities that they're looking at. But ultimately, the special teams analyst really just kind of becomes the special teams coordinator. But you have a guy that's on staff that kind of bears that title, but it really just kind of, if you don't have a good analyst, then it doesn't matter, because you can't position coaches just can't dedicate that much time at this level to special teams. It just can't happen. They just don't have the time. They don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the time. So it usually falls on the analyst, which those analysts, that's how they get their comeuppance. So I'm sure they welcome that tremendously, because it gives them a chance to shine, and where they wouldn't ordinarily shine as an offensive analyst or a defensive analyst. So that's why I love this rule, because you've got these analysts now that can really truly contribute to the coaching effort, and they can really kind of get their cut their teeth a little bit, where they pull a guy here, pull a guy there, and they have the iPads. They can take a lot of the burden off the position coach's shoulders by being able to pitch in, and that's where this rule and the spirit of this rule has been tremendous. But what else has been tremendous? This episode. But what the bad news is we got to go. That's all I got for you today. Dave Cohen coming up later this week. We'll get our game picks in, keys to the game, all that stuff, and then we'll take you into Saturday, where it's a road trip to Atlanta to take on Georgia State. So make sure you check me out at Locked On Vandy on social media. Like and subscribe. Find me. Enjoy it. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you back here next time on the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Anchor down.